Yeah, she's just wrapping up her other show. We opened this new magical girl series, typically enough, at the middle school for our leads. One of whom was Minamo here with her creepy as all hell pencil case. I don't know, I just can't trust that bunny thing there for some reason. Anyway, she was going to hang out with her friend Natsu, or Nachi as she called her. Admit it, this is all of us as kids. Granted, for me, it was more so that I could get back into playing Mario 64, but for these girls, it was something a little more interactive, though probably not as fun. That said, I do like how they're establishing Minamo here by having her take a bit more of a backseat. Yeah, interestingly, throughout this first episode, until the end, Minamo acts a little more like a secondary character, which thankfully seems to be by design rather than, unfortunately, a good handful of precure leads. Meanwhile, Nachi was a little more aligned with your typical lead in most hero shows, with her being incredibly assertive and as peppy as the color of her hair. Though, as we'll see by the end, that's not exactly the case. Anyway, in place of a proper opening, we instead got a little montage to both briefly show a little bit of our other leads, as well as to give us a good look at the town they lived in. It wasn't much, and likely was a bit of a cost-cutting measure, but it also wasn't unwarranted, as we'll see throughout this episode, world building was incredibly important to the show. Anyway, Minamo returned home where her father and brother greeted her. The latter wanted to play a game with his sister, but Minamo had other things to do, so their father offered to play with him instead, which he wasn't exactly for. Hey, I think I already found my favorite character in the show. After getting changed, Minamo decided to log into a very special app, at least for the girls in their town, as while on the surface it looked like your typical viral video site, it had a little more to it rather than just brain-rotting shorts. Okay, am I crazy, or did that sound like Kirby's Warp Star? But yeah, for specifically young girls, the app sent them to the Alisphere, which was basically Wonderland with a little more bureaucracy, which kind of feels counterintuitive to the themes of Lewis Carroll's books, but I've seen worse. Yeah, just as long as you have two X chromosomes and are under the age of 18. Yeah, unless this is brought up in some way later, it seems like this show is being pretty blatant about who their target audience is, but whatever. I was honestly more distracted by the title of this episode that reminds me of a few of my other favorite IPs ever. But yeah, through Minamo's narration here, we got most of the world building we need for this show, as it is coming from someone who's still most likely a visitor, and we also did get some little bits with the actual fairy residents of this world, who did give us an idea of how this kind of sort of Wonderland worked. We also got a little more through this exchange with Nachi when she talked about the flow of time. My or dad, or you could train to fight against Cell. Now, of course, for these girls, it was mostly so that they could take in a concert before supper, with the resident diva of this world, Kaguri, also happening to go to their school. This would lead into some more nice characterization for Minamo when she brought in all of the glow sticks for this concert, both so that she could give some to Nachi, but also kind of highlighting how she preferred to sit on the sidelines and let others who she viewed as the real stars shine. Now, they did kind of just spell out her very obvious character arc, with Minamo outright stating that she didn't think she was all that talented, but there were also some good subtle bits, like just this look in her eyes when she clearly admired Nachi's drive, as she had reserved a space for her own mini concert the next day. Now, you could read this as both a face of admiration, but also a little of yearning, as likely deep down she also wanted to stand out, otherwise she likely wouldn't have been able to come to this world that encourages freedom of expression in the first place. Anyway, the concert started, and as if the show itself was encouraging Minamo to get off her ass already, Kaguri's song was all about seizing destiny and forging your own path. It was a really good song on its own that rightfully got everyone excited, and holy hell! Well, that's a face that's gonna haunt my nightmares. Stop showing it! Also, does this setup feel a little familiar to anyone else? Like, we've got a redhead holding a concert as our obvious protagonist was watching from the stands. Granted, in Minamo's case, she did have her girlfriend by her side, so maybe things won't go south just because the show has to sing prayers and high noise. Though since this was more meant for the Sunday morning crowd, no one was turned to dust, but we did still get the awesome first battle of the series. Yeah, it's like some sort of gear of symphony, but I can't quite put my finger on it. But yeah, like the magnitudes of Symphogear, this song, Over the Blaze, was meant to reflect Princess Zeal, aka Kaguri's resolve, to defend this world from its enemies and protect the hearts of its people. And of the 3 character songs that they released ahead of this series, it was easily my personal favorite, as I do like myself some good flamenco music that really helped to accent Kaguri's fiery fighting style. The fight by itself was good, not a Sakuga fest or anything, but easily this song put it over the top. I especially loved it here when Kaguri put a little more oomph into her voice just as she caved this poor Mook's face in. But yeah, Minamo had developed a strong interest in this totally mysterious lady in red who just so happened to appear after Kaguri disappeared. Pretty sure that mostly just applies to the princess cures and the ones in Mario. However, there was apparently a legend in the Alisphere about princesses who defended their world from invaders. Again, fairly simple, but effective enough world building for now, depending on how they plan to develop this stuff going forward. With that, and in spite of the monster attack from the previous day, Nachi was still determined to proceed with her little concert that she was holding, because for her, she wanted to give it her all. Aw, isn't that nice? By the way, did you notice there's a big black flag on your head? Kaguri was also observing them, as along with being the Kanade of the show, she also played the role of Tsubasa as someone who didn't want any unnecessary outsiders to get involved in her affairs, which seemingly these two were just going to do their own thing. However, there was no guarantee that the villains of the show, the Jamork, weren't going to end up dragging them into things. In fact, it looks like they already got to poor Nachi. Oh wait, she's just suffering from stage fright? Well, okay then, I'm sure nothing bad will happen to this girl and... Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what happened to her, but based on how the Jamork piled on her, it's probably best not to ask. Still, in spite of things seeming too late for her, Minamo wanted to protect her friend and her dream, which in turn gave birth to a dream of her own. Alright, Kaguri might have got to the first fight of our season, but of course our lead character should get the first transformation sequence and it's already over? Really? Disappointed! Yeah, well, I will admit, this was a good cliffhanger for this first episode, as well as a good sign that, unlike Precure, this series won't shy away from using them when necessary. I'm also really hoping this was just an omitted version of the transformation sequence, as not only is Precure being them, but Symphogear had some of the most amazing magical girl transformation sequences of the genre, so y'all don't really have an excuse. That aside, this is still a very solid start to a new magical girl IP. Obviously, the music was amazing, especially Over the Blaze, but the world building here was also pretty good, and I am very much interested in Minamo's arc going forward. Already, I'm pretty interested in this character, and really want to see where they end up taking this girl, who right now is more of a follower than a leader. Whenever you start a new IP, it is of course important to give the audience an idea of what it's going to be all about. For this show, some older fans, like me, will just recognize this as a more G-rated Symphogear, which it certainly was, with it even wholesale reusing elements from the first episode of that franchise, but with less disintegrations. Now, as a fan of Symphogear, I don't mind this at all, as they did at least include the most appealing part of that franchise, with kick-ass magical girls who sing songs about how they're going to be kick-ass. Meanwhile, the cuter, more kid-friendly elements like the fairy world also appeal to me as a Precure fan. That aside though, for a new audience, you do need to establish a good basis and hook, which this show got across with two very important elements, world and character building. In this case, they've so far at least set up a solid basis for a fairy world that's accessed through an app, probably designed by the same guys behind the Metaverse Navigator. Hopefully, they'll give us a little more in the following episodes, but until then, I'm also really invested in our lead Minamo, who's a very interesting take on the magical girl lead, in that in any other show, she would be, at best, a second in command, and even then, I think she'd volunteer to be a tertiary member. And yet clearly, her arc for this show is going to be about discovering the true leader she actually is, which I'm looking forward to seeing, as she is such an amiable character. Combine that with some decent fights and amazing music, and this series has a solid basis for being a Precure competitor that, while I highly doubt they'll overtake them anytime soon, they'll at least give them some decent competition because overall this is a really solid start to a new series. While I doubt many of us will be able to access the full benefits of the Owlspirit app, at least their stuff is also available on Spotify. Thanks for watching some sort of review, as even as I'm recording this, there's still no subs for it. I'll try to wait on some subs to come out, then if they don't, I don't know, I'll just do it myself. Look forward to Comrade Gav tomorrow. Until then though, for now my friends, and oh, I got a new app here. I wonder if it's gonna take me to some sort of fantasy world, and no, it's just some spam. Delete.